LinkedIn, Dave Wilson, the Ring of Hire Show. Amy, it's working. It's going to all
I
the.
love it. It is.
Yeah, I'm sitting there saying, all right. It's always great, everybody, when it goes to all that. Like I tell people, it goes to LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, X, Spotify. It's nice when it works. So, how you been, Amy?
I'm great, and I am super excited for this
I know.
show.
You've been
As you
telling me
know,
all week. Yes,
yes,
all
yes.
week. We have a special guest tonight, Lorraine Grubbs. How you doing, Lorraine?
I'm doing well, thank you, David.
Perfect. And we got a great show tonight, everybody. I'm going to do the video here in a second. It's about why or why we can't keep employees. And when Amy came up with that subject, I loved it. So we'll be right back after this video. That one felt like it took a while to get through. Well, I know everybody, Amy, I know you're excited, and I'm going to let you introduce Lorraine, and then we're going to definitely have her talk about herself, what she does, and because I'm excited. What a great background.
Well, we kind of had our show before the show, so
I know, we're all
we're
talking about it.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, as you know, David, I've worked with Lorraine at Pinnacle Airlines, and she was phenomenal, and she was the VP of HR, and the amount of support she gave to me and to the rest of the team. I mean, it's just what she's able to provide, the wisdom, the knowledge for everything under HR. So tonight's topic is just so great because of the books that she's written, being an executive coach to CEOs, putting people first. We've talked before about the amount of what it costs for turnover. And I
Right.
think that if we can elevate the senior leadership and how they hire people, the training they give them, it's not going to be a fix immediately. But I think having someone like Lorraine come in and being able to help support the senior leadership to give them a better foundation is just value add. So that's why I'm so excited about Lorraine being on the show and being able to talk about everything, regarding people and people first.
Well, tell us about your background, Lorraine. You got to tell us, and then the 4 books. You're just going to mention those because I got to put them out there. I couldn't believe it when I looked at it. I was like, wow. I said, because I bet all that experience, I was telling Amy, all that experience, I bet has got to help you write those books.
Well, it really did. And I was fortunate enough to learn my craft at one of the best companies that I could ever go to work for, and that was Southwest Airlines. And I worked there for many years. Ultimately, I went from marketing to the director of recruitment, of employment, as we called it. So I had the opportunity to take a look or take the lessons that a great company teaches you, and hire and fire. And I mean, all that. I learned about values. I learned about, how to work smarter, not harder.
Right.
So when I left Southwest Airlines, and it was not an easy decision to leave, my father was very ill, and I knew I had to, come back to Houston from Dallas. I kept thinking, what has this company done to make me so loyal all these years? And the impetus of my book started in my head, and we finally published. It's called Lessons in Loyalty, and how Southwest Airlines did it. So they're stories as told from my viewpoint on how, as an employee, why I stayed so long, and what are the things that it really takes for an employer to keep employees, I guess.
Keep them.
And then as soon as the book was published, I began to get all these calls, not anticipating it, of course, but begin to get all these calls to come out, and we want to be just like Southwest. We want to do it this way. Well, you can't. You can't be just like Southwest. But what I did learn is you can take those principles and practices and you can customize them to your company. And so I did that for many years, wrote, other books as I began to consult, and it took me into leadership development
Right.
because I realized at that point, it's not really about the employees. The culture is really driven and should be driven by the executives of the company. I mean, I've sat in boardrooms before where people wanted to hire me, and they're like, oh, we're a great company and we do this and this. And the one question I would ask them would be, you know that and you believe that. But if I were to walk out onto the factory floor or into your offices, would your employees tell me the same thing? And honestly, in some of the struggling companies, they wouldn't. And
Right.
so when you can align how the executives think with what the employees need, that's really your sweet spot as a company. And it's not easy to do. It's much easier to say than do. So ultimately, after doing that for many years and being hired to do consulting for different companies in the cultural realm, we want you to come in and help us improve the culture. I decided to see if the principles that I had learned at Southwest and ultimately adapted to other companies were really alive and well in other companies. So
Right.
I reached out to several companies in Houston. I was reading about the top 100 companies to work for one day in Houston, and I reached out to the CEOs and was very pleasantly surprised that I was invited in to their companies to say, and I got a plethora of ideas about what they were doing to recruit, to welcome, to retain, and ultimately wrote my third book, which was how to have a happy workplace. But what
Right.
I realized at that point is the principles are all the same. It's how you apply them that are different.
That's what's amazing how you said, like, when you look back, you both have talked about the airlines, like that's where you started, that's where you got all that information, you know what I mean? Like the experience, and then to take it somewhere else. And it's
Mhm.
kind of like, that's why I like the name of the show is when Amy said, it's like, why are they leaving? Like, why did the good people leave? Why do all the top people leave? In your experience, Lorraine, my first question would be to you: is there something that really stands out to you? If you had to say one or two reasons, possibly that people leave a lot, there's just something that stands out.
Um, well, I think I kind of touched on it a minute ago. It's when the boardroom or the top executive echelon loses touch with why people really want to come to work. You start a company and you're going one direction and it looks wonderful. Now, if you're not stopping every little while, every 5 years, 6 years, and in fact today it's maybe even three, to take a look at your tactics and how the market is changing, if you're not in touch with that and able to make the shift and the changes, you're becoming more staid. You're not going to keep the best and the brightest. I was telling you guys earlier that I had the opportunity to spend some time in Palo Alto and realize that, you know what? Their average turnover at where I spent time was less than 2 years or less. So imagine hiring someone, and again, you as the hiring manager are going, you have to adapt your thinking to say, you know what, I'm only going to keep them here for 2 years, and that's okay. And while they're here for those 2 years, because I've got the brightest and the best, how can I get them to perform at their best, while at the
Right.
same time not having them feel used? You have to challenge people. So I used to say, I learned an important thing early in my career. There was a Chinese philosopher and a French philosopher, and the Chinese philosopher says, you never stick your toe in the same river twice. And the French philosopher says, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Now, you would think they were talking about diametrically opposed points of view. One is saying
Right.
life is nothing but change, the other is saying life never changes. But I believe that what should never, never, never change are the values of what brought you as a company to the
Okay.
table. Honoring people, respecting people, it's all about the people. What should change are the tactics of how you implement that. I.e., let's
Right.
go back to COVID, when all of a sudden, people are getting to work at home and hybrid, and all of a sudden after COVID, people are having to make those adjustments where they can. And so, but if you'll always as a company keep, why did we start the company? and it's based on respecting and valuing people, whatever that looks like for you,
Right.
I don't think you're going to have as many problems as some of those companies that forget, why they were created in the first place.
That makes sense.
So, what's the difference between a company that says it values the culture versus those who actually live it? Because they're kind of similar, but they're different.
Well, it is absolutely my experience as an employee, and you want to. A lot of companies hire consultants to come in, and they will say, "Okay, I want you to map out the employee experience," and if they truly do it right, you're going to see how that employee is in fact treated, valued. Do they have an opportunity to, advance? So I've actually turned down business in the past where people will bring me in. Oh, we want you to, improve our culture. Well, the culture is so broken, and I know that the executives don't understand, and they're not willing to understand. And I'll walk away from that because I can't help them. I can't help them. So when you see it is, you know what? One of the things we used to say to people at one point at Southwest Airlines, we'd say, all right, I want you to walk. I don't know that they can do that anymore with security, but in the old days, just walk down the hallway and greet every employee, talk to anybody you want to talk to, and just see what they have to say. So when you can do that and you keep hearing the same stories,
Right.
you know you've got it right. But that's the best way I can tell you that I know how it works. Are they
Right.
referring people? If you've got a very robust, I want my aunt to work here, I want my cousin, my brother, my sister. I mean, if your people are proud to work at your company, it's and they're bringing their friends, or you're doing things right.
Right. I
Right.
like how you said about when you first said about saying, at the top they understand that culture, but walk out on that floor. I think a lot of people can relate to that. What do you tell organizations, or what do you do to try to get through the top leadership to explain that? Like, because I get that, because a couple companies before that was like that with me. It was like, wow, okay, well, we have parties on a Friday. We have, simple, the little things, and that it's a good thing too. But culture has changed. Like we talked about it so many times until COVID. I don't think anybody even said culture, workplace culture. It's like now, what is it? So how can you explain that to the uppers to bring that down to the lower part?
That's a really good question, David. In fact, as I'm sitting here thinking about it, what do the upper echelon understand? They understand financial. They
Right,
understand numbers. I mean, a company has to make money, or come
right,
on, you're not going to be in business. And so, when you can try to do the analytics of what's happening and tie it to the culture, i.e., the turnover, or the number of egregious cases you have against you, or things like that. When you can tie those things to an analytical,
right,
here's the bottom line ROE of or ROI of what's happening, um, that's one way to do it. That's absolutely one way to do it. The other thing is, one of my everybody, a lot of people have this, and that's get out, get the executives out among the people. And I'm not talking
right.
about just one day, all of them were
Mhm.
going to different areas. I love that undercover boss. I know it was Hollywood and everything,
I love
but
it.
what you can do undercover boss, and you really truly find out what's really happening out there. I
Mhm.
think that your executives, again, that's where it has to start, because they've got a budget, they've got shareholders. If you're, public, they've got people they have to report to from a financial perspective. But a lot
Right,
of times they don't understand how, cutting this is going to impact that. Now, the second part of that is, to me, communication. When the executives don't have that ego, and they basically are going to say, well, I have the control, and they don't need to know that. I think the more transparent companies are probably having a better time of it, good, bad, or indifferent. I mean, if
right,
if you're going through a bad time, if you have to do this, and you have the courage to be able, or the not even the courage, but the kind of culture where you can say, guys, this is what's going to happen. This is why it's happening. And guess what? When we're out of it, here's what's going to happen as a result. And you can keep those promises. Now, if you
right,
can't, immediately you come right back in and say, okay, guys, I know I said this, but this is. And so again, it's kind of like that deposit in the bank. If I'm credible, And I tell you something, you're going to believe it. But if I keep lying to you and things keep changing, that won't happen. So it just goes back to, honest communication.
Right. That makes sense.
Well, and even explaining, as you just mentioned, like explaining the why behind it. It's not about delivering all great news. It's about being transparent as much as you possibly can and admit when you're wrong. And, I could have handled it a little bit better this way. I apologize. But, the thing too is truly understanding what your team does. Now, I would never say, hey, VP, come in, do the work of an agent for 2 weeks, but at least get an idea of what they're facing, what a passenger service agent is doing, a ramp agent is doing with the delayed flights, canceled flights, aircraft switches. So then you can better understand, like, when these events happen, why why issues occur, instead of just yelling and blaming. At least be aware, and knowledgeable. And I think that, you know, it, again, you don't have to do the job for weeks on out, but you at least be aware of the why behind it. And then I used to talk about like the walk a mile. So, when I'm walking out on the ramp with somebody, like, do I like this or don't I like it? And why don't I like it? And then I want them to see things through my eyes and be able to make sure that, I'm not telling them the information, that they are getting that information and they learn that way, because now they are regurgitating that. So, like, do I like it? Don't I like it? And why? And in that way, it sticks with them. And but being able to be teachable and trainable, but at least know what the team is doing is like what I think is the crux of it.
Absolutely. And the thing is, Amy, and you and I used to work together, so we knew that we had a good culture where we worked together. And it's not just about one thing, is it? People think, well, if I do this, then this will change. Wrong. It's kind of like, raising kids. It's over and over and over and new and new and new, and it's a stick to itiveness that you have to have that mindset to say, putting people first is that's an easy thing to say, but
Right.
you put people first when they act badly, when they
Right.
have temper tantrums, when they
Mhm.
make mistakes. I mean, you gotta. And so when people see you forgiving or truly caring over and over and over again, I
Mhm.
had an employee one time. It took him 3 years for him to trust me as his manager. Why?
Okay.
Because and when he told me that? When he was leaving my department to go
See,
take a
see,
promotion.
I figured that. I knew you were saying that. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so I asked him, I said, well, he said, you had to prove it to me so many times because I had had such a bad, bad, bad experience prior to coming to work here. And I
Mhm.
didn't believe you. And you kept doing it over and over and over and over again. And finally, I believed you. So you have to have that kind of patience too with
Right.
people.
To
And
be
I
honest.
think, I look at the safety culture, which comes up a lot. And, coming from the airline background and knowing that you just can't say, hey, be safe. And then, hey, now we have a safety culture. Like, when you are interviewed, the safety is talked about. When you're in training, safety is talked about. When you're employed, the safety is talked about. I mean, it's talked about every day,
That's right.
no matter what. And so it just becomes ingrained in you that that is just how you live, breathe, walk, that is how it is. And I worked at one company that, they said they had a safety culture, but there was no safety committee, there was no lead.
Yeah.
They just said, okay, stay safe out there. I'm like,
That's
that's
it.
not safety culture. That's not it. That's not it. But, just having it ingrained that that's just what you do. And I go back and think about a manager, like, I won't interview anybody if you are not dressed appropriately. And if you show up late, I'm not interviewing you, because I am very particular. I don't care what position you're going to do. You could be a janitor, you could be a general manager. um, it's very important for me that I hire the right people for my canoe, because my canoe can tip at any time. And I want to make sure that I have the right people in there at any level, at any time. And so I'm going to set that level high. that if you are not dressed appropriately, I will interview when you come back when you are dressed appropriately. And if you show up late, I'm not going to interview you because that you're showing your best foot at that point. And that's how I wanted the general managers to also think about that. And I had a team that when somebody would show up for an interview late, they said, no, my boss is not going to hire you. So they just turned them away because it was that ingrained, like that that's not who you want on your team. So don't even go there. So I think that it just has to be said again and again and again and again. And I like what you said, Lorraine, that it's not just that you don't say it just one time. It has to be said repeatedly and until they get it. It's like, it's 21 days to form a new habit. I just read recently it's 66 days to form a new habit. You got to keep talking about it until it just becomes natural.
That is. Lorraine, do you feel that money, when people leave the companies, do you think that money it's one of the topics, the best part of, why they're leaving? I don't believe it is sometimes as much about the money, because I never hear people saying, hey, I got a new job, I'm going here. They don't say, well, I'm going to, it's extremely amount of money. They just want to get out of the company and go somewhere else. And you're only at a certain level unless you're climbing up. But if you want to leave a company, you know what you're worth. So, do you think money has a lot to do with that, or that's just a piece of it?
It can, depending upon the situation that you find yourself in. I'd say that if you're only going for money, very likely you're going for the wrong thing. And again,
Right.
going back to knowing what people really want, how they're valued, and we were just talking before this the podcast came on, as to how is it that, we have all these generations working today. And so
Right.
it makes it really difficult on a manager you're managing someone that's 70, you could be managing someone that's 18. So it really puts the onus on me as a manager to understand who I'm managing and what they need. And so when now again, I know you have to have standards. Amy, when that person shows up late or whatever, if someone showed up a little disheveled, I might ask the question, maybe they don't know any better. Maybe there's some reason that happened. I would want to know a little bit more of that. But when your standards are high, what good begets good. People are going to want to come to work for you, but that takes a while to build up that kind of a culture or that kind of a standard, so that like I said, over and over and over again.
Mhm.
So people, are they leaving? Are they running away from, or are they going to? And if they're running away from, then something's wrong with what you're doing. If they're going to, that's what we should all aspire to do. Is we should aspire to help our employees get what they really want. If that means, again, that they're only going to stay with me 2 years, and you know what? While they're here for 2 years, I'm going to shift my paradigm and go, how can I get them to perform at their best in 2 years? Because you know what? If I treat them well enough, they're gonna recommend their friends or the whatever, so that my pipeline continues. It's when you forget to treat, and it's when you start treating people like numbers. It's when you lay off and you don't treat them with respect. You can lay off and have people walk away feeling respected if you've communicated well, if you've given them enough resources to help them, if you truly mean it. Then they're going to go, you know what? I didn't like being laid off, but they don't hate you. They don't have a horrible experience. They're not going to badmouth you to the public, to the whatever. So it goes back to how much you value people. If you value numbers above anything else today, and there are a lot of companies that do, you know what? You're going to expect that high turnover, and that person will feel like a number. But some things just never change. The value of who you are as a company and how you value people should not change. The tactics will. So
I love how you said that, and it's how you worded it, because that's the truth. I've always felt that way. I always call it, as I evolve, as I got older. I've been through all this stuff, like the experience. Nobody really taught me a lot of that stuff. You just dealt with it. It was always something like sexual harassment when that came out in the 90s. We didn't know anything about it. But then all of a sudden you were thrown into it, but you didn't have classes on it. You were just in a meeting like, all right, what's going on here? and you had to learn, and you had to, hopefully, that's why I said they would bring people in to teach you to, for the management. And in the paper industry, like you said, Amy, even with safety, we had the safety guy that, boy, did he walk to work every day 2 miles, because when he got hired, he made that place to where you walked in, you saw lights, different colors. That meant who got hurt, who didn't. Billboards up there about safety, numbers. We haven't had a lost time, luncheons. Everything was safety everywhere. And I asked him, why did you have to walk? A lot of people didn't like him. He changed the culture. He came in, he changed the culture. He had to get his stress out, and he would walk to work. And a lot of people would say, I want to run him over. And I'm like, listen, he's only helping you to make you safe. And then finally, people started to drive up to the place. You'd be like, you saw the red light, you'd be like, uh-oh. They'd walk right in as a manager. Who got hurt? What happened? A lost time. And that was, like you said, it was ingrained into you. But that's how he changed it, and we stuck with that.
Right. And changing a culture is probably one of the hardest things one could ever do. So you have to take a look at, when I go in and work with companies, I want to take a look at what they already have that's in place that's working well.
Right.
And trying to, continue to build on that. Because a lot of times through the mergers, through the acquisitions, through this, through that, companies forget. Or the thing will get lost, Remember, Amy, I remember one of the exercises we did that was so powerful for me, where we worked together at Pinnacle, and that's when we had this culture committee that we put together, right?
Nice.
And so we wanted people to communicate, and they had quit communicating with the executives in the company. And we wondered why. And it was all of a sudden, we went to the airports, and somebody years ago had a great idea. They had this suggestion box. Let's just, put a little suggestion box. Now today you do it electronically, but and what we found out when we went to all the different parts of the airport, these suggestion boxes were full of ideas. Nobody had ever opened up the box to see what they were. And so at the very bottom, you had these great little ideas. And as they kept filling up, and pretty soon they're cursing, and you guys are horrible, and nobody ever opens this. And so we reinstigated that open channel of communication with employees, with focus groups, with lines. And what had happened is, because, again, the culture isn't just about loving people. It takes a lot of work, processes, procedures. So somebody has to own that piece of the business. So let's say what had happened in this case was the person that had owned that suggestion box left the company. And that was not part of their job description, so it went away. And nobody ever checked them again. And so when we opened up that chain of communication again for a different avenue, it just changed a lot of things. And people think, well, we have to spend a lot of money. You really don't. You really don't. If you get people to be encouraged and want to be part of your mission, again, do people understand what you really do? I worked with a company one time. They had the greatest line. They were a helicopter company, and as hospitals were closing around the communities, the smaller communities, they had, if you had a heart attack and you had to make it to a hospital and you were out in rural, where, then you're going to die before you get there. And so this helicopter company sold an insurance policy where, hey, for so many dollars a year, we'll come out and we'll guarantee that we'll be there within the hour of whatever you need. Well, the thing is, as I worked with them, I said, what is your one thing? What is the reason that you guys are in business today? And clearly it's, to save lives. But their one thing, I loved it. It was, I am the best part of the worst day of your life, as they picked people up. Now, do you think the pilots knew it? Absolutely. The helicopter pilots. You think the nurses and the doctors knew it? Sure, because they got to see everybody. But what about the person that's back at headquarters, answering the phones or behind the scenes? Do they know it? Do they know what part they play in that day? And if they don't, that's where your opportunity lies, is to say, you know what, you're as invaluable to this organization as I am, and you're just putting it, you're doing a different role. So your one thing, when you can get down to what is we really, really do, And you'd be surprised. That's something that I do in one of my classes, and I'll say, "What do you guys do?" "Well, I'm in the hotel business." "Really? Is that okay? So let's dig deeper." So when you can do some time as a company figuring out what you really do and what your mission is, and truly then figure out how to make everybody that works there understand that, that's
Right.
one of the steps that you can take.
Right. Yep. So Lorraine, in my business, I do the mission statement. So I will print out the mission statement and put it on individual paper, and then divide the team up, and then have them put their mission statement together. And it's very fascinating to watch different companies where they just don't know it, because I won't let them look at any business cards or anything like that. You either know it or you don't. But trying to put that mission statement together, like if you don't know it, how are you going to teach your managers, your entry level employees? How are you going to know that? So,
Right,
mhm.
right.
Yeah.
I mean, I just had a friend of mine, her son just interviewed for a job. He was let go and because of a downsizing, and he was, I mean, immediately, and he's in the IT business, and he started getting job,
Yeah.
interviews from all over the country because they can work remotely. He had a job offer for $425,000 a year. And you know what? He turned them down for a job. He took a job at $280,000 a year. Why would he do that? Because the company that offered him $425,000 a year treated their people just like numbers, and that's why they had to throw those big numbers at people because they were leaving all the time. The
Mhm.
company that hired him, ultimately that he chose to go to work for, had a mission and a cause that he believed in. I'm
Mhm.
helping
Like that.
people. I'm helping this cause. I'm helping this mission.
Yep.
So there's the difference.
Yeah. I like what you were talking about, making sure the employees know, and, ideas that make a difference. You form these committees and you allow your employees to be part of that, and have senior leadership on that as well. So when those suggestion boxes do come in, that you are at every level, you've got somebody that has a say so in that. So they are part of the solution.
Yep.
And thinking about, instead of doing focusing so much on exit interviews, how about you do like a stay interview, or I used to call it a how's it going survey. And I
Absolutely.
wouldn't do it so as like 20, 30 questions. I don't ever do that. It's usually around 11 or so questions. But I want to know, are you happy? Would you recommend to other people? Like, I want to hear what you have to say. And and if you want to call out yourself and say this is who you are, you can. If not, that's fine. But at least it all went to the senior leadership, so they'd all get to hear what was happening at the stations, and be able to react and respond before it got to a lawsuit, before we had a turnover, before there was a safety issue. So just let people be heard, and let them be part of it. Let them know that they matter. And I think that when you really boil it all down, do you feel valued? Do you feel listened to? I mean, does your voice matter? And I think that when you really get down to any level, it doesn't matter if you're an entry level, or an executive. You want to go to work and you want to feel like you do matter, like that what you did has helped. Whatever it is that the mission is. So I think
And
that
you
those
want
are
them to
so
feel like
important.
part of the solution. That's exactly what you're
Mhm.
saying. You
Yeah.
need to let them know they're valued enough. And maybe, and that's one of the biggest mistakes companies make, is they gather all this information, it gets to the executives, and guess what? Nothing ever comes of it.
Nothing.
So rather than saying, "Hey, we love this idea, we're going to put you are in this operation, you're in this operation, you're in this part of the operation. Let's pull you together and let's come up with a robust plan to address some of this stuff." And guess what? We're going to put it in some kind of a communication form that says, "Guys, we have 50 ideas. We can only do 3 or 4, but
Right.
thank you for submitting, and here's how," and continuing to communicate and work on those things. You're right, Amy. That's a great idea.
Hey, Lorraine, I wanted to bring up, I talked to you about money before, but then the other thing that I always feel strong about is I always say, like, family, okay? Because how often does leadership look at that as well? Because I think that's a big, big part of your job, choices of where you're going to go. Because now, again, since COVID, work-life balance. Did you ever hear that before? No, it's come to pass. Being in logistics for all these years, I've seen a lot of crazy shifts, and I always would say to myself, "Damn, I wish they would just make it family friendly. And some companies have done that. And they've done that because maybe the shifts are different, but boy, then can you get some extra space because some parents with single parents anymore, with everything, split families, childcare, dropping off, have to be picked up. There's so much stuff. I know probably as a bigger company it's hard, but is it for a bigger company versus a smaller company to be able to get that across, like family? Does that make sense?
Again, yes, it does, and it depends. Now, if you're coming to work for me and you know that you're going to be gone 90% of the time, and you're a single mom, we used to have flight attendants that did that,
Right.
and they were constantly missing or hitting up against the no show rules or whatever, and before we fired them, I remember this conversation I had with this one young lady, and I said, but you knew when you came to work here that those were the standards, and yet you came to. So is that the company's fault, or is that you're just not thinking straight because you wanted to be a flight attendant? So
Right.
there's a combination of two things. One is the awareness of the employee as to what they're getting into. Number two, what a lot of companies include your families as part of their culture. And when you can do that, when you can say, you know what, thank you for allowing your husband or your wife to be gone, 50% of the time, here's a vacation, here's a party we're going to throw, here's a thank you you're getting, or whatever. And when you can include those families,
Right.
in the thank you, they become part of your culture. Again, there are those instances where if I'm going to be applying for a job and I'll be gone 90% of the time, I shouldn't do that if I have a family. But again, if my values, again, it comes back to what are people's values? What are their greatest values? And many times in my leadership classes, and Amy, you've done this too, I'm sure. What are people's values? And when you can live your top 3 or 4 values every single day at your job, you know what? You're going to be very happy doing that.
Right.
But if you've misapplied for a job like this kid who turned down $425,000 a year, guess what? He didn't want to be a number. He didn't want to be on the road. He didn't
That's
want to
amazing.
be, and to him, it was more important to be home with his family and to be able to, make a difference. So, yeah, you have to really, again, as a company, you have to take a look at where are people leaving, why are they leaving, and sometimes, you know what, if all you can get people for are 2 years, then change your paradigm and say, you know what, 2 years it is. Let's, blah blah blah. But families have always been to me one of the most overlooked ways of creating.
That's how I should say. I like that. Overlooked.
Mhm.
I like that because that's a big thing in someone's life.
Yes.
Because let's face it. Again, that's why I said that but I like how you said that. Overlooked. I love
Well,
those words.
and David, in logistics, and you've got 5 different start shifts, and you're a
Yep.
24-hour operation. The business, you definitely have the needs, but
Yep.
if you look back at like what I call like the 30,000 foot view and be able to say, look, if I shift it and I have 80% of my staff, it would be better for them. Then looking at what's the cost per turnover,
Right.
and if you're going to make 80% happy versus 20%, there's some things that I think you can look at to make those adjustments that's not going to hinder the day-to-day operation. Obviously, keeping in mind opening up Pandora's box,
Yeah.
you've got to look at that as well. So, but I just think that you're not being pigeonholed and being able to look at the big picture, and how can that be a better benefit to everyone overall
Right.
without putting yourself in an issue.
It is.
Good point.
Yeah.
Especially for family, like I said. I got one more for you here. Is what kind of advice do you give? Like when you go into a company, what is one of the things that you really see that they want to change? Is it always, do you see the same thing in different industries, or is it different? IT versus, say there's different fields. Is it almost the same reasoning in all those fields, kind of, that you've noticed, Lorraine?
Well, again, it depends. In my world, yes, because I'm coming in to take a look at your culture and how you can make it the best it can be. I've worked with literal rocket scientists at Los Alamos all the way down to car dealerships and things
Right.
like that. So when I go in to talk to a bunch of rocket scientists, my language may have to change a little bit. My logic may have to be more intact. But at the end of the day, it is about who you are as a person. Do you feel respected? Do you enjoy what you're doing? You feel like it's making a difference, you
And you
know?
said about pillars, like the pillars. Is that kind of like what you mean? Like there's always the same thing, different.
Absolutely. If I'm a leader and I don't know my own strengths and weaknesses, leading self, and then I'm going to teach you long term, or I'm going to show you how to motivate your team, so leading
Right,
the team, then everybody that's in a leadership position should understand what business they're in and how that business makes money and how to read a financial statement. And then ultimately, and then this one has really taken on a whole new life for itself, and that's leading into the future. And the
right,
future used to, as we know, used to be, oh, well, we can have a 5 or 10 year plan. Not anymore. You'll be
no,
lucky if that thing is still surviving in a year or two, and you build in enough resources
yep,
and processes to make those adjustments quickly when you have to. But
Mhm.
yeah, so it's this, when you're in answer to your question, people are people.
right,
And so when you can be known for treating them with respect, that doesn't mean you're not going to fire people. It doesn't mean you're not going to hire bad apples at all. It's having enough systems and processes in place that when you do have to fire them, you feel like they fired themselves or you're
right.
fair. And they're going to walk away going, well, gosh, I did this to myself and I lost it. Again, that's Pollyanna many times, but when you can have that happen more often than not, when you have a downsizing and all of a sudden you are giving these people all these resources to help them find a new job. I'm going to introduce you to David, who's going to help you
Right.
get a new recruiting job, and Amy, who can help consult, and things like that. And that's going to make me feel like I don't like it, but you know what? At least I know they couldn't help it because they've communicated with me.
Right.
I know why it's happening, and guess what? They're gonna help me, and I don't feel abandoned. I don't feel I just another number. I don't walk in. You give me my stuff in you have a security guard. Take me to my office, and you walk me out in front of it. It's horrible the way
Mhm.
people are treated sometimes.
It's amazing how my last thing for you, Lorraine, would be then is if I've learned anything from you tonight, and again, thank you so much for coming on, is everything that you've always talked about tonight. It's always been about people. It's always been about everything you've said. It's people. It's how you treat people. Everything comes right back to that, and that's why I learned a lot from you tonight. Just listening to you and the experience, I love it because that's what I believe it does come down to. So on that part. So Amy, your turn for.
Yeah, so like I think there's a lot of times that we hire people into management positions because they're really good at what they do, and but we forget that they've never managed anybody. And I mean, I think that can certainly, leadership development, that's
Yeah,
definitely, an avenue to give people the support they need. If they don't genuinely care, then they have no business being in a leadership management role. And I think that that is one thing that, if, with hiring, truly be able to identify, do they actually care? Are they genuine in their approach? Because, as we've talked about before, you're not always going to say everything that people want to hear, but the approach and delivery is going to make or break. And I think being able to articulate that in a manner and give the why behind it and make sure that it's in a respectful format. And you have to literally care. And if you don't, then you have no business being in that role.
And you can't fake it, can you?
Ooh,
People will see
absolutely.
right through that. Yeah,
Right. Yeah.
yeah, you're
no,
right.
and they see it all the time. So wow, okay, well we hit the 45 minutes. That's not too bad.
Wow.
That's not too bad.
Crazy.
Again, Amy, out of all these pages, I didn't bring up anything.
I knew it. I knew it. You're killing trees, Dave. Killing
All the
trees.
time. I can't.
Um,
As she was talking, or as you're talking, all of a sudden you start thinking of those questions. You're like,
right.
"Oh, that's pretty good." I said, "That's how it works. That's how it just comes to when you do a podcast. You're like, what are you going to say next?" But I still have 40 other things. So hopefully, we're going to have Lorraine. We really appreciate. I mean, myself, I've given up the time, but I just want to ask you one more thing about all your books. Where can you get them? On Amazon?
On Amazon, yes.
All
Or
right.
yeah, on Amazon. Or LorraineGrubbs.com, my website.
All right, we'll put that on there. And Amy, if you'd like to say something, we'll call it after this.
Lorraine, I appreciate you. I've always admired you. I've always respected you, and I was so excited when you agreed to come on the show. And
We bring on some good guests, Amy. Everybody from
well,
from her past at other jobs.
Amy's the woman. She is. We've been waiting for Amy. When she called, I'm like, "What do you need?"
Yeah.
Well, I deeply appreciate you
Yeah.
coming on and sharing your knowledge and your wisdom. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people who will just, it's very insightful, and definitely appreciate it. And thank you.
I picked up some new words tonight. I picked up some new words that I wrote down. So I'm good now, you know. So, all right, everybody, thank you so much. We'll be right back. I'm going to talk to you right after this video.